May 11, 1967, Atlantic Studios, New York City. Three British musicians walk through the door at 1841 Broadway, dragging equipment that makes the veteran engineer's jaw drop. Marshall amplifier stacks, 100 watts each, a double bass drum kit, enough volume to deafen a small army. The engineer, Tom Dowd, has worked with John Coltrane, Ray Charles, and Aretha Franklin. He's never seen anything like this. Then someone delivers the bad news. The band's work visas expire in 3.5 days. The recording sessions took only 3.5 days, as the band's visas expired on the very last day of recording. 3 days to capture lightning in a bottle, 3 days to record what would become one of the most influential albums in rock history. The band is Cream. The three men hate each other. And in 72 hours they will create Disraeli Gears, the album that transformed blues into psychedelia, psychedelia into hard rock, and hard rock into heavy metal. This is the story of an album recorded under impossible pressure, powered by extraordinary talent, and destroyed by the very tension that made it brilliant. Welcome to the Sound Vault. Every album has a story. This is Cream's. To understand Disraeli Gears, you need to understand the beautiful disaster that was Cream in early 1967. From its creation, Cream was faced with some fundamental problems that would later lead to its dissolution in November 1968. The antagonism between Bruce and Baker created tensions in the band. Bassist Jack Bruce and drummer Ginger Baker had played together in the Graham Bond organization. They'd also tried to physically harm each other on multiple occasions. Baker thought Bruce was interrupting his drum solo and hit him. Bruce destroyed Baker's homemade drum kit with his upright bass. Then Eric Clapton, already a guitar legend at 22, with "Clapton is God" graffitied across London, proposed they form a band. The idea was insane, but the music was undeniable. Their 1966 debut, Fresh Cream, reached the UK top 10 but failed to break America. Atlantic Records owner Ahmet Ertegun had a solution: bring them to New York, record with American producers, make them a hit. By March 1967, Cream had completed their first American tour as part of Murray the K's Music in the Fifth Dimension concert series. They'd played alongside The Who and Wilson Pickett. New York's music cognoscenti were spreading the word. But the recording of Disraeli Gears was characterized by an underlying tension, with Cream's management and Atlantic keen to push Clapton into the spotlight as the frontman, and resistance being voiced towards some of Bruce's songs. Jack Bruce later admitted, "I was kinda gutted because I'd done a lot of work, and I'd mostly been the lead singer, and it was working pretty well." They entered the studio not as a unified band, but as three virtuosos in a Cold War. The vision for Disraeli Gears wasn't born in a boardroom. It was born on the streets of London on January 29, 1967. That night, Cream attended a concert at the Savile Theatre. The headliner was a then unknown American guitarist named Jimi Hendrix. Jack Bruce watched Hendrix play and went home electrified. Bruce tended to write songs with lyricist Pete Brown during the night, as that was the only time they had to spare within the band's tour schedule. That night, after watching Hendrix, Bruce picked up his old double bass and started playing. Pete Brown recalled, "We had very little time to write for Cream, but we happened to have some spare time and Jack came up with the riff. He was playing a stand-up bass and he said, 'What about this then?' and played the famous riff. I looked out the window and wrote down, 'It's getting near dawn.'" That's how it happened. Sunshine of Your Love was born as dawn broke over London, a direct homage to Jimi Hendrix, who would later perform the song live, unaware he had inspired it. But Atlantic Records had bigger plans. They wanted Cream to sound more commercial, more American, more radio-friendly. They assigned producer Felix Pappalardi, a future member of the band Mountain, and engineer Tom Dowd, a legend who'd never worked with a rock band. Jack Bruce said, "Musicians were not very studio-savvy in those days. We weren't knowledgeable at all about the art of recording. I think the sound of the album, you'd have to give most, if not all, of the credit to Tommy Dowd. He was a genius of an engineer. The vision was clear. Merge Cream's blues power with psychedelic experimentation. Make something that sounded like 1967. Vivid, electric, impossible to ignore. May 11th, 1967. Day 1. Tom Dowd watches 3 roadies unload equipment he's never seen in a recording studio. They recorded at ear-shattering level. Everyone I'd worked with before was using Fender Deluxes or Twins, 6- and 7-piece bands that didn't play as loud as this 3-piece did. Dowd comes from jazz. He's worked with quieter, more controlled sessions. This is chaos. But the clock is ticking. They have 72 hours before their visas expire. The first track they tackle is Lordy Mama, a blues cover. Felix Pappalardi takes the tape home overnight and returns the next morning with something completely different. Pappalardi took the tape and added new lyrics he co-wrote with his wife Gail Collins, transforming the song into Strange Brew, the first track completed at the sessions. Strange Brew became the album's opening shot. Bluesy, psychedelic, with Clapton's menacing guitar sounding like a machine gun. Then came Sunshine of Your Love. It nearly didn't make the album. Cream drummer Ginger Baker compared the initial version to the up-tempo Hey Now Princess. He said that he advised Bruce to slow it down and came up with the distinctive drum pattern which emphasizes beats 1 and 3. But even slowed down, something was missing. The rhythm wasn't clicking. Baker was frustrated, unable to find the right beat. That's when Tom Dowd intervened. Engineer Tom Dowd said, "There just wasn't this common ground that they had on so many of the other songs." I said, "Have you ever seen an American Western where the Indian beat, the downbeat, is the beat? Why don't you play that one?" Ginger went inside and they started to run the song again. When they started playing that way, all of the parts came together and they were elated. The Indian beat, heavy on the toms, emphasizing the downbeat, transformed Sunshine of Your Love into a primal driving force. Clapton added his famous woman-tone guitar solo, quoting the melody from Blue Moon. Bruce and Clapton traded vocals, adding layers of intensity. The band recorded most tracks in 1 or 2 takes. The sessions were swift and efficient, with the band recording no more than 1 or 2 takes of a backing track and then adding minimal overdubs. They had to be. Every hour mattered. By May 15th, the final day before their visas expired, they'd recorded 11 tracks. The album was done. The speed of the recording masked deeper fractures. Ahmet Ertegun looked on Clapton as the natural leader of the group, but Bruce had written most of the songs, and Baker resented being left out of songwriting credits entirely. Ginger Baker resented the way the band handled songwriting credits. Despite being regarded as one of the greatest drummers of his era, he suffered from financial hardships, in part because he got the smallest slice of royalties from the Cream years. The tension wasn't just creative, it was personal. The antagonism between Bruce and Baker created tensions in the band. Clapton also felt that the members of the band did not listen to each other enough. Clapton would later recall a concert where he stopped playing mid-song. Neither Bruce nor Baker noticed. They were too busy trying to outplay each other, pushing the volume higher and higher until the music itself disappeared beneath the noise. Even in the studio, the dynamic was toxic. A power struggle to be the front man in this trio of giant egos was not in anyone's best interests, and as things turned out, it was Bruce who eventually had most of the songwriting and singing credits on Disraeli Gears. Atlantic Records initially rejected Sunshine of Your Love. Ahmet Ertegun called it psychedelic nonsense. It was only when Booker T. Jones and Otis Redding gave Sunshine of Your Love their wholehearted approval that Ertegun agreed to include it. The album's title came from a moment of absurdity. Roadie Mick Turner was driving when Eric Clapton was talking about getting a racing bicycle. Mick, driving, went, "Oh yeah, Disraeli Gears," meaning derailleur gears. We all just fell over. We said that's got to be the album title. A mispronounced bicycle part. A joke that became history. Disraeli Gears was released on November 2nd, 1967. The timing was perfect and terrible. Perfect because 1967 was the year of psychedelia, the summer of love, Sgt. Pepper's, and Are You Experienced? Terrible because the market was oversaturated with experimental albums, and Cream was still relatively unknown in America. But the music spoke for itself. The album was a big commercial success, reaching number 5 on the UK albums chart, number 4 in the US, and number 1 on the Swedish and Finnish charts. The album was also number 1 for 2 weeks on the Australian album chart, and was listed as the number 1 album of 1968 by Cashbox in its year-end album chart. Critics were divided. Rolling Stone noted it displayed miles of listening pleasure, but also critiqued that the album does not totally hang together, where, in some tracks, the material is too pale to support the heavy instrumental work, which makes Cream such an overwhelming trio. But the British music press was ecstatic. Disc and Music Echo raved it. Shows the completely individual way the group is developing from their early blues days. What mattered most wasn't the reviews, it was the impact. Radio stations in America couldn't stop playing Sunshine of Your Love. The song entered the charts in February 1968 at number 36. When the album was released in August, it re-entered and climbed to number 5. It became Cream's only gold single in the United States. The cover art, created by Australian artist Martin Sharp, became iconic. Sharp explained, "I really wanted to capture that warm electric sound of their music in the colors and expression of the cover." Inspired by Cambodian sculptures he'd seen on his travels, Sharp created a psychedelic collage that perfectly captured 1967's visual language. Cream had arrived. America finally understood what British fans had known for a year. This was the future of rock. Disraeli Gears didn't just sell records. It rewired rock's DNA. BBC's Chris Jones described the album as a perfect encapsulation of the point where the blues got psychedelic and in turn got heavy. Before Disraeli Gears, rock bands played blues or psychedelia, rarely both. Cream merged them into something heavier, louder, more primal. Disraeli Gears took that music and infused it with a psychedelic sound that created the blueprint for bands like Led Zeppelin and Mountain. Eric Clapton's guitar work influenced every hard rock guitarist who followed. His use of the wah-wah pedal on Tales of Brave Ulysses, discovered just days before recording, became a signature sound of late 60s rock. His woman tone on Sunshine of Your Love inspired countless imitators. Jack Bruce redefined the role of bass in rock. His instrument wasn't just rhythm, it was lead melody, driving the songs as much as Clapton's guitar. And Ginger Baker? His drumming was unlike anything in rock. Jazz-influenced, African-inspired, impossibly complex. He didn't keep time, he created new rhythms entirely. The album launched the concept of the power trio. 3 musicians, maximum volume, no safety net. Hendrix had done it with The Experience. Cream perfected it. AllMusic describes the album as a quintessential heavy rock album of the 60s. It paved the way for Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, every band that would dominate the 1970s. In 1999, the album was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. It was ranked number 112 on Rolling Stone magazine's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time in 2003. Success couldn't save Cream from themselves. By mid-1968, the band was at war. Tensions between Bruce and Baker led to their decision in May 1968 to break up, although the band were persuaded to make a final album, Goodbye, and to tour. The fights were constant. Baker stated, "The last year with Cream was just agony. It damaged my hearing permanently, and today I've still got a hearing problem because of the sheer volume throughout the last year of Cream." Clapton, caught between 2 men who despised each other, finally gave up. Eric said, "I've had enough of this, and I said so have I. I couldn't stand it." But the deeper controversy was about credit. Ginger Baker believed he deserved songwriting royalties for Sunshine of Your Love. He'd created the drum pattern that made the song work. Without his Indian beat, the track would have remained a mediocre blues shuffle. Yet he received nothing. Pete Brown, Jack Bruce, and Eric Clapton are the credited songwriters on Sunshine of Your Love, omitting Cream drummer Ginger Baker, who resented the way the band handled songwriting credits. The financial disparity haunted Baker for decades. While Bruce and Clapton made millions from publishing royalties, Baker struggled financially. He'd co-created the sound but didn't legally own it. In a 2006 interview, when asked about Cream's influence on heavy metal, Baker reportedly said, "We gave birth to heavy metal. We should have gotten an abortion." By November 1968, just 14 months after Disraeli Gears was released, Cream played their final concerts at London's Royal Albert Hall. The performances were filmed, the band was finished. They would reunite only twice, briefly in 1993 for their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, and again in 2005 for a series of concerts. But the damage was permanent. Baker commented, "What he does is that he apologizes and apologizes, but I'm afraid to do it on a Cream reunion gig. That was the end. He killed the magic." Jack Bruce died in 2014. Ginger Baker died in 2019. Eric Clapton remains the last living member of Cream. But Disraeli Gears lives on. Every time a guitarist uses a wah-wah pedal, they're channeling Tales of Brave Ulysses. Every power trio that takes the stage owes a debt to those 3.5 days in May 1967. Every heavy metal band that emphasizes the downbeat learned it from Ginger Baker's drums on Sunshine of Your Love. The album has been covered by everyone from Ella Fitzgerald to Carlos Santana. Jimi Hendrix played Sunshine of Your Love as a tribute after Cream broke up. It appeared in movies like Goodfellas and School of Rock. It's been sampled, referenced, and revered for over 50 years. Classic rock's Louder notes it became a touchstone recording of the 60s counterculture and captured epic studio performances by Jack Bruce, Eric Clapton, and Ginger Baker at the peak of their powers as a group. The irony is inescapable. Three men who couldn't stand each other created one of the most cohesive, powerful albums in rock history. The tension that would destroy them also made them great. Martin Sharp's psychedelic cover art hangs in the Museum of Modern Art. The album has been reissued, remastered, and celebrated countless times. It remains Cream's best-selling record and their most enduring artistic statement. 57 years later, Disraeli Gears sounds as vital as it did in 1967. The riffs still hit. The drums still thunder, the vocals still soar. 3.5 days, 11 songs, one masterpiece. The story of Disraeli Gears is the story of impossible art created under impossible conditions. Three musicians who hated each other. 72 hours to record an album. A mispronounced bicycle part that became the title. A drum beat borrowed from Western movies. A riff inspired by Jimi Hendrix, who would later play it in tribute without knowing he'd inspired it. Every detail sounds fictional, but it's all true. Disraeli Gears reminds us that great art doesn't require harmony. Sometimes it requires friction. Sometimes the best albums come from bands on the edge of collapse, channeling their conflict into something transcendent. Cream gave birth to heavy metal, pioneered the power trio, and proved that three musicians could create as much sound as an orchestra. They did it in less than 4 days. They did it while barely speaking to each other. And they did it so well that we're still listening over half a century later. Jack Bruce once said, "It's nice that people remember that album. We don't just remember it, we live in the world it created." This has been the Sound Vault. Every album has a story, and some stories, like Cream's, change everything.